Heal to feel. Let's start this journey together. Hi guys, welcome back to Heal to Feel. Today we have my lovely co-host MJ.
Morning.
Morning. And we have the most genius, my favorite doctor in the entire world. Anybody who knows me knows his name. We have Dr. Byrnes here, so thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
There's so much to talk about today, but I want to introduce you. You're a functional medicine chiropractor. Any other titles I can call you? Genius, psychic,
Warlock. I've been called everything.
Yeah.
But generally, I've had to study a lot of different things to get to where I am now to be able to help people the way we do.
And I feel like you're word of mouth, and it's just always packed in there. I went in where I had like a health crisis in 2019. I was in the salon. I had severe stomach pain and I just seizured and collapsed. And there happens to be an EMT sitting next to me. So they like held my head and they took me in an ambulance, and I ended up being in bed for like 4 to 5 months. And like scary symptoms. Nobody to this day knew what was wrong. Some people, they say just faint and seizure, like it wasn't a real epileptic seizure or anything like that. But it was really scary because I didn't know what was wrong. And like, I would get out of bed and my blood pressure would drop. I couldn't hold anything in my stomach. I would feel like I was out of my body. I was dizzy. I mean, I was going to doctor after doctor after doctor. And I remember I came into your office and I never drink Gatorade, but it was like the only thing that could like keep me somewhat, I don't know, my sugar stable. And I'm like barely walking into your office. I'm crouched over, and I'll never forget, somebody in the waiting room said to another patient, they're like, "Hey, does this like really work, you know?" And she's like, "Honestly, stick to his plan. It's been a year and like my whole health has turned around." I was meant to hear that. And since then, he's my God. I don't do anything without him. He tests your body, and we'll get into all of that. But he's turned my health around. Not only did you help me overcome all those toxins that were in my body, but I used to have like blood sugar drops and thyroid problems. I just never trusted being in my body.
No.
And now, I can play a 3-hour tennis match. And even if I'm feeling like, oh, I'm so tired, I don't fear that I'm going to faint or collapse or not trusting my body. So thank you for saving my life.
My pleasure. But the healing is done by you. I'm here to help facilitate that process. So what you were suffering from in medicine, they would compartmentalize it.
Yep.
Because it's all hyper-specialization. And so you might say a gastroenterologist, a neurologist, but in essence, you were suffering from what happens when your autonomic nervous system breaks down. So that's what controls everything.
Autoimmune?
Autonomic nervous system.
Autonomic nervous system.
So that part of the nervous system is controlling things like your blood pressure, like your digestion. And you can get even bouts of dizziness because it can affect areas even like your cerebellum, which has to do with balance, and your vestibular system. So people can really, and even emotional stress can cause things like this.
Yeah.
So you can just hit the wall.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Even I used to get bouts of vertigo, at least once every few months. And one time I went in with vertigo and you did some crazy maneuver, and that was the end. I never got it again since I've been on your supplementation. So why I love you is not only, and this is how I explain to people, you go in and they'll scan the body and you can see, and I'll let you explain that. But it's not a one size fits all for support for the body. And you have all these new types of machines, but even with supplements, he'll test the vials on your body, right? We always joke that I'm an alien because like what works for 98% of his patients just doesn't work for me. There's a million probiotics out there. It's not a one size fits all. How do you know which one to take? Well, Dr. Byrnes will actually test your body, right? He'll give you the answers. He'll muscle test. So tell us kind of how a first session works and how you work with the mind and body together, because a lot of Western, they compartmentalize. They don't look at how emotional stress is held in the body and how it can accumulate.
So it's a great question. I approach each patient as an individual. Obviously, you have to. You have
Not
a
a
background,
number, you mean?
right? Not a number. They'll either bring labs in. I often will run labs. I want to see what's going on with your biochemistry. So I have a foot in what we call the allopathic world and training in that, which is some standard medical techniques. But unfortunately, that's not what gets people better. That's how to heal a crisis. Okay. And that may be just symptomatically. We have to look at what's really going on in your body. So I had to develop ways and study techniques that look at the way the body works through the nervous system, through the energetic system of the body, which would be meridians, chakras, things that you can't see but are tangible. And science has actually measured a lot of this. We'll talk about that a little later. And so when somebody comes in, we take a thorough history. We see what's going on with you. And then I do a scan on your nervous system. So we look at motor and autonomic. Now, the motor is what moves you, as your muscles. And your autonomic is how your body controls all your organs and glands and blood pressure. And so you have division called sympathetic and parasympathetic. And most people that come in, they're having problems are locked in sympathetic dominant pattern, which is a fight, flight, or fright. So our goal is to get you out of that so your body's own innate healing can happen.
MJ, I think you're in that.
Most people are.
I'm told it's taking everything in me to not to launch into a million questions, but I'm obviously.
Yeah, you will.
So as we go through that process, then when you see me, I do an exam on you, and I'm looking at the neurology. I have some training in functional neurology too, which is different. A traditional neurologist would look at diagnosing lesions in your brain. Okay, so that's an allopathic approach. Functional neurology looks at why is the brain working the way it is in a dysfunctional way, and how do we functionally correct it? So that took me down the rabbit hole of finding out that, a lot of things can do that. Even your diet can mess with your brain. But the most important thing is your mind. So
there's a difference between your brain and your mind?
Yes, there is.
Can you explain?
So your mind.
Oh, your mind is psychological.
So where is your mind? If
your mind is like right here, right? It's like
that's
where
your
you're
brain.
thinking about. Oh, your brain isn't back here? I don't even know.
Your brain's up there.
Physical.
It's
the brain's
up there.
physical.
Oh, your mind is not
For
physical.
most of us.
Your
the brain is here, but the mind is separate from
Clip
the brain.
that, right?
Yeah. Think of the brain as a conduit. It receives and transmits information. The mind is different. Science has been asking that question for an eternity. What is the mind? Then you get into what is spirit, because the brain we know can receive and transmit information. But what happens if we cut the brain down the middle, which they've done? And why can some of those people continue to function as if that wasn't done? So there are things that are confounding in neurology. There were studies done on people when they were born that half their brain was missing. So if you look at MRIs of them, half the brain's missing, but as an adult, they function perfectly. So we have to rethink neurology. Something else is going on. And so I followed the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton a lot.
I love
early
him.
in my career. Yeah. And his explanation made the most sense to me. And he wrote a seminal book called Biology of Belief many, many years ago. And I loved it. I ate it. And also looked at Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force. When you start to look at this, what it really is that your mind is energy and thoughts are energy. Everything in the universe is energy, all right? So once that thought initiates, there's a chemical cascade that happens in your brain. So now the brain's the transformer. So it sends that cascade of neurochemicals into your tissue. Those are things like neuropeptides, neurohormonal modulators, neurotransmitters. And that is what creates the changes on a biochemical level.
The changes that you would have if you could have them.
Yeah. But it started with what? It started with a thought. So what happens is then that goes to the cellular level. You're about 50 trillion cells in your body. And each of those cells has a cell membrane. And what his work found was that the brain was not in the nucleus of the cell, which we thought for years, where the repository of DNA information is. The brain is in the cell membrane. And it's a conductor. Okay, so it has gates and channels.
So it's like the computer,
just
of
like
our
a
body.
computer.
The
Yeah,
headboard.
just like
Yeah.
a computer.
Yeah.
So it's the keyboard. So we have to put information in order for things to happen. So your thoughts become that information that's then translated through the neurochemistry down to the cellular level on that cell membrane. And this is what I found fascinating, because in practice, the more I went down that rabbit hole of real healing, deeper healing with people, it was always emotion that was the preeminent thing. All my autoimmune cases, chronic degenerative diseases, things began to really turn around when I really looked at that deeply. There's only so much you can do on a biochemical level. But ultimately, if you're going to go up the hierarchy of need of the body and the most power, it's always the mind-body. That's where you see the biggest miracles too, right? See cancer patients sometimes that are stage 4 and suddenly they
Heal.
change something in their life and they completely heal.
Yeah. And there's been we had Anita Morjani. Here we go again.
Yes.
She comes up, but she was the one that died on the table and went into a coma and had tumors all over her
Yes.
body. And she healed on the spiritual side,
Absolutely.
came back, and the body caught up with her thoughts.
And why is that? So if you think about it, you spend the first 7 of years of your life in theta waves. So that's
sorry,
like
in what?
hypnosis. Theta waves.
Theta waves.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So we haven't reached higher consciousness until we get past the age of 7. So we're really taking everything in from the environment, and we work a lot on the limbic system, which is why children oftentimes are obstinate, and we call it the terrible 2s, which is really the terrible 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s.
Terrible. What about the terrible 12s?
The terrible 12s or 18. I have teenagers. So what you're seeing is programming that's put in there. And that programming is as Lipton says, is not from you. It's from your mother's teachers, preachers, peers, and now influencers. So things that go into your brain early in life.
And you're making those associations. You can do love equals abuse, right? Because that's what you're seeing. And then it becomes, right? You're
well, that's why if they did studies looking at children that were born in war zones or in the inner city where there's, just violence everywhere. And the mother on that 3rd trimester through that placental circulation is sharing neurochemicals with that child. So what you're getting is this fight, flight, fright response. So they have to be ready when they're born in the world to deal with that. So they're born with faster reflexes, a little more disconnected from parts of their cortex. And so this is part of how the body prepares you for that. And that's why you're born.
Physical reflexes?
Faster physical reflexes. They make good athletes, but not always the best students.
Right.
And so this is part of how we program through the environment. So it's always really the environment.
And then if you're in utero is the opposite.
Yeah.
They're in a very peaceful environment and the mother is.
They should be. But what if that isn't?
Is that what we want?
What if that isn't a peaceful environment? What if the mother is full of anxiety and full of fear? So that's what brings on early developmental programming, and you're born like that. These children, they're very unhappy, they're screaming all the time, and they can't figure out why. We think that's part of the reason why.
I've always believed that, actually.
Yeah.
And, I was pregnant later in life, but when I was like convinced that everything that I feel is directly going to impact the baby. And then, and so here we are.
So even with surrogates, it kind of depends on their environment, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I found that fascinating because, back in school, we were taught that, the genes dictate what can happen to you. It's based on percentages. But in reality, it's the new field is epigenetics. And epigenetics means that your environment changes that gene expression, whether it turns on. So the more you change your body, the more you change your mind into a positive direction, the more you turn on good genes and turn off bad gene expression.
And how do you do that? How do you change your mind?
That
is the
I
golden
feel like
question.
so far I'm happy because I was because I'm like that checked off that box, but I'm also so curious. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, that's the question, right? So when somebody comes in and they have A lot of health problems. Let's say gastrointestinal problems, maybe an autoimmune disease like Crohn's.
I was thinking about, what about the colicky children?
Yeah.
Is that an example of
Yeah.
maybe the mom was having a hard, stressful pregnancy
Sure.
and then it passes on to the
Sure.
child?
And sometimes, or a difficult delivery.
Mm.
And there's up to 90 pounds pressure when a physician is pulling on that head coming out.
Yeah.
A C-section is extremely traumatic for a child. So we usually have to go in and correct things that have happened in the dural meningeal system, the
I
cranium.
mean, I wish I knew you and Austin was born, because we had a rough delivery and man just came out screaming,
Yeah.
like, and was the only thing that would calm him down was I would take him outside to the trees,
Yeah.
and that would calm his nervous
Isn't that amazing?
system.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
So, most people would feel better planting themselves around trees, but there's a grounding as well. And that's the other thing we could talk about.
Yeah.
Most people are completely not in touch with the Earth's
Dr.
resonance.
Burns told me, he's like,
Mhm.
you need to go put your feet on real grass.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Is
Makes
the
a big
front yard
difference.
have grass? No.
Trevor wants to, we had to replace it, but yeah.
And
want
now
to
we
go back to
understand that
real grass.
more. There's the Schumann resonance of the Earth. And so we have taken ourselves away from that over time, because as soon as we put on shoes and built our concrete jungles, we no longer touch the Earth. And so we're not resonating with the Earth. So that's why people feel so good when they take a walk on the beach.
Mhm.
Right? Just take a barefoot walk on the beach. And right as you're walking along the shore where those waves are hitting, there's a high ion potential too that infuses into the body. So we're energy beings. And I mean, if you look at energy, it's everywhere. Your phone works. You can't see the energy coming into that phone, but it'll play videos. You'll catch calls on it. People take everything for granted. It's all quantum. So if you take a cell and you look at the cell, it has a cell membrane instead of a brain. It has organelles instead of organs. And then that cell makes up tissue. That tissue makes up an organ. That organ makes up part of what makes your body whole. But if you go down to this atomic and subatomic level, you've got electrons and protons spinning around, and it looks like the galaxy, doesn't it?
Mm.
So now on a macro level and a micro level, we can see that we're all just energy, and that energy is vibrating at frequencies. That's why you hear me talk a lot about frequency.
He's got these new really cool machines, which apparently me and Austin are babies, because he explained what that machine is that you use in the ear.
Oh, so there was a French neurologist by the name of Dr. Ralph Nogier. And back in the 60s, very early, he had figured out an interesting thing. He had people come back from the Middle East, and they would have a hole burned in their ear right about here. And his patients had sciatic pain, but they come back, the hole in their ear, and they had no more sciatic pain. So he's like, this is crazy. I'll see it once or twice, but I'm seeing it over and over. They knew one point, that was the point, and their way of treating it was to burn a hole in your ear.
Oh my
It's a
God.
little excessive. So what he figured out, he's a brilliant guy, is that the ear embryologically is a reflection of your entire body. So it's the best microsystem in the body.
So it's kind of like
yeah.
if you guys have heard of reflexology, like on the foot, you know how there's different parts.
Yeah.
Like the ear is way
Much more advanced, much more
and
powerful.
every little point on your ear.
If you turn a fetus upside down and lay it over your ear, that's how everything's arranged on your ear. We call it somatotopic reflection of your body. And there's cranial nerves that innervate your ear. There's 7 divisions of 4 cranial nerves, and those go back to your brainstem. So we may find a point for the liver right in here. So we'll test it with a device. I have a device that will measure that. So it's measuring, and this is all, the treatment is done with something called microcurrent and frequencies, no GH frequencies. And so he did a lot of research on this and was able to map everything out. And I have a chart here. It's just, there's over 200 points on the ear. And it's a fantastic system because these aren't really acupuncture meridians. Some of them are. Some of them the Chinese found. But he went back to China and taught the acupuncturists this. And since then, it's an incredible thing. It's been used to treat all kinds of things, even addictions.
Really?
Mhm.
What have you found? In your office, what have you seen using it?
What haven't I seen?
Well, what have you found that's something miraculous that you saw that they overcame it with this treatment?
So what I've found is that, and I really use it for a lot of things. For pain control, it can be amazing. But I always go deeper beyond like what's causing the pain. That's obviously what the question you should be asking. It isn't always what people think. There are areas on the ear that correspond with areas of your brain. So if I'm having problems with stress in my life, then that's going to be your frontal orbital lobe and a little strip here in your brain, what we call the amygdala, the hippocampus, and midbrain and brainstem. And so I can go and test those points on somebody, and they're in a fight or flight response. Now, if they're walking around in a fight or flight response pretty much all of the day, then your body is in defense physiology. And you cannot be, as Dr. Lipton says, in growth and regeneration and defense simultaneously.
If you're in fight or flight.
Constantly.
So
Or
one of
the
the first things
freeze,
is get
like
you out of
you.
that.
Or
Yeah.
freeze.
You're kind of more like freeze. Like MJ,
Well,
I feel like
yeah.
hers is just nothing gets you rattled. You're just
Oh, yeah. Let's dig in because I am curious. So, what is an example of somebody who is constantly, what does that look like on the outside?
What it looks like on the outside is you're going to have health problems, first of all, because if you're running from the tiger, you're not digesting your
You
food,
guys,
right?
if you're running from the tiger,
You're not digesting your food. So if you think about it, so you're in fight, flight
Oh,
physiology.
interesting.
You've taken away areas. So the brain will compartmentalize, and it's all based on survival. So if you want to thrive, we have to get ourselves out of defense physiology. So, and that's even how I learned to do the chiropractic I do different and use different techniques that work on something called coherence or entrainment. And what I found is actually the brain and heart that have to be in entrainment as well as the spinal cord.
Yeah. Talk to
Yeah,
us about
yeah.
the brain and heart. Because I know, and then also the brain and gut, but I know you work a lot.
A lot.
Because he measures, right?
Yeah,
I
we
remember
measure.
you told me, you're like, you look worse than a car accident patient. However, it's really interesting because you got a lot of green in your heart, which
Yeah.
you're like, you got a really open heart. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really match, but that's what kind of saved me, you said.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because the Institute of HeartMath did a lot of work on this. And in the early 90s, I went and saw one of their earliest presentations. And it was the International College of Applied Kinesiology, something I'm involved with. And that's a multidisciplinary body of doctors from different disciplines that learn to use neurology and muscle testing to test what's going on in your body. So they presented there showing that there's this amazing connection between your brain and heart, and that they both have these measurable fields, but the heart was about 50 times that of the brain, which was unexpected. So we say things like living through our heart, heartfelt emotions, so that innately we know it's true. But the heart is actually an endocrine gland, so it secretes hormones like oxytocin. That's the hormone of love. Right?
Our heart
actually
has
neurons in it that can think.
I didn't know that.
So what happens is if it gets out of sync with the brain, then you get into a state of incoherence, and then that raises catecholamines, which are stress hormones, neurotransmitters. The most common pattern I find is high noradrenaline, high cortisol. And
How do they get disconnected?
They get disconnected through trying to modulate stress beyond our ability of our body to adapt.
How interesting.
So this is why the exercise of
more
just heart-focused exercises are so important. They're so
like
simple.
what? Like meditation?
No, because they did is they had people just focus on their hearts initially, and they would measure using EEGs and blood chemistry panels. They would measure the stress hormones and what happened in the brain. And what they found is that it didn't really click until they had the person visualize a strong emotion like love and appreciation or joy right over the heart. That made the difference. And so what they found is that simplest technique is just to literally call the attention to your heart initially, kind of slow your breathing down, and focus the area of your attention directly over the heart. You just put your hand there initially as you slow that breath down. We teach people, 4 seconds in, hold 7, out 8, or box breathing. And as you do that, then recall something that makes you feel deep love, appreciation, or joy. It could be a memory. Try to choose something non-controversial. Okay. And then as you hold that, I tell people, if it has to be as simple as your kitten or your dog, do it. Or your child's first birth, whatever it is. And then hold that over the heart as if you feel the emotion there. That's the key. You have to feel the emotion over the heart. That changed everything. So, and I used to demonstrate this in workshops where we'd hook people up to it live and watch how that changes just by the use of emotion.
And what would happen?
So what happens is they go back into a coherency between the brain and heart. It's a form of entrainment or coherency. So if the heart's doing this and the brain's doing this, we get them to sync up.
And when they're not in sync, what are the effects?
Oh, that's complete chaos. so
What
so
would
that's
someone
high
experience?
stress hormones, disconnection between your brain and gut. So it's perception that drives all of this. Remember that. Because your perception of stress may be different than hers. If I take 100 people, put them in a stressful situation, some thrive, some don't, some are neutral. And the reason is it's all based on your perceptions, and perceptions drive behavior. So the perceptions are what create the thought that drives the neurochemistry that changes the chemical composition of your cells. And that's what changes the machinery of the cells. So how things function in your body is, if you go up the totem pole of hierarchy, it's really the thought. But the thought is your perception. And how did that get there? So what I did, I started testing people on beliefs. So if they come in and say, well, I said, do you believe that you can be healthy? They say, of course I do. And I test them and they weaken on that.
Yeah, he can. So by meaning testing, he'll take your arm and hold it up and try to push it down. And if it works and it's strong, and you can do this with food and just to test
and the reason
is
very simple. It's not voodoo. It's neurology. So your brain, through motor pathways, through your spinal cord, it's called interneurons, will send a signal out. And if I tell people, all right, hold both your arms up equally, and we push down, there's an art to this, obviously. And some people come in, they can't hold anything up. Their body's in such chaos that we call it's like a yin state. So there's not enough facilitation left over for motor output. So everything's very weak until we fix what the problem is and everything flips back on. But if I have you say something that you want to be true and you weaken on that, that means there's some internal conflict, some perception that's getting in the way of that. And this is how we get through. If we looked at Lipton's work with beliefs, and he would say, well, you have to say it as if it's happening. Okay, I am successful or I am healthy. And that's true to an extent, but I've had a lot of people doing that and they've been doing it for years and nothing changed.
They don't believe it.
Because they don't, and I've found that they unconsciously have such a programming error with that through something that's happened to them in the past, that this is where we start to open up the Pandora's box here.
And how do you find?
And does the past have to be that age 0 through 7, or can it be
anything? But he finds like an age, and he'll find words. So how does that come to you?
So it's very interesting. There was in the circles of applied kinesiology and chiropractic, we have Dr. Scott Walker's work early with something called neuroemotional technique. And that was blending what we knew about neurology and Chinese medicine. Okay, so there were meridians in the body. And he was finding if you would map these meridians out and have them think of something that would always correlate with a specific meridian. And then that meridian would correlate with different emotions. So the Chinese, through thousands of years of observation, would see the liver would be anger and frustration. Lungs were often grief, suppression of grief or depression. It got to be where, and it's not always a one-to-one relationship like that, but it's pretty accurate, and you see it through time. Now we understand why that is. And the reason that is, there's a neuroscientist, Dr. Candace Pert, who wrote a wonderful book called Molecules of Emotion. And that showed that, as she discovered opioid receptors on the brain. So brilliant, one of the greatest neuroscientists of our time. She discovered that molecules of emotion float around in your blood. So just as Lipton says, as the brain generates the thought, these become translated into these neuropeptides, and these flow around in your blood and they bind to certain organs. That means that particular emotion may have affinity for receptors in a certain organ or areas in your spinal cord. And that's what I found as I started testing people. There were specific patterns I saw.
But how do you get the emotion
So
come to your
that
head?
she wants to know how I do it.
My son's like, I know you're psychic.
Because I can, so yeah, I got to the point where I used, there was a traditional way we do it with like things like neuroemotional technique, but then I became more and more intuitive as I went on in my practice. So now, if we get to talking about, how do I do what I do?
Just pops in your head. Like, does the word just pop in your head?
Well, let's do a little background here. So if science, to read somebody's brain, they use an EEG, okay, electroencephalogram. So they put the little electrodes on there. So we're going to read your brain. And you can have the person think and do things and measure what comes out. But now we can do it with magneto-electroencephalography, which means we're reading it from out here. Well, how's that happening? Because thoughts are energy. So there's electromagnetic properties to even your thought. If you can measure it from out here, you know that you don't have to have something on the brain or in the brain to read it. So the body has this amazing set of bioelectric fields around it. Many of them have been studied. And yes, there are things called chakras. And yes, they seem to correlate with different nerve plexi that go to the endocrine system. Whether you call it chi, prana, we're all talking about the same thing. So in Chinese medicine, through the acupuncture meridians, thousands of years of observation, now we can take devices and measure them. Okay, so we can go on there and electrically see the voltage change on those. Ryota Raku started that, was a Japanese scientist. So all of it is really getting to the fact that energy and thoughts are what's pivotal if you want your body to be healthy. Because your thinking can change your chemistry. Your chemistry will change whether something becomes a problem in your body or not, or whether you're going to heal or not. This is heal to feel, right? That's the name of this. So what's the feeling that you carry unconsciously? If 95% of what goes on during the day is not your conscious mind, it's your subconscious mind running the patterns of your body.
It is?
Yes.
95,
and about 60 to
say that again?
70% of that, as Lipton says, 60 to 70% of that are things that are self-sabotaging. Things that are working against you. Then we have to find a way around that programming because we all come from different backgrounds and we come from different perceptions. And so you mentioned your own issue, right? We were off camera, but coming, here and dealing with culture shock.
Yes.
Okay.
Should I share that really
Sure.
quick?
Yeah.
Okay. My family, when I was in the middle of high school, we decided to move from DC to California and Beverly Hills. So I went from this tiny little, what do we call the goldfish? The bowl.
The bowl.
The
right.
little baby, wonderful fish bowl, and that to this ginormous ocean, which was Beverly Hills, California. The school was at least 4 or 5 times bigger than my school, and that was where I was born and raised. And I was physiologically, the way that it showed up was that I didn't get my period, and I was a virgin. It wasn't anything other than a physiological change that I was so lonely, overwhelmed, and was taken, like, again, my parents didn't force me, but once I got here, I didn't have that connection. I kind of lost all my friends. I had a really hard time relating to anybody around me. And it was sort of like a severe anxiety and depression and shock.
Yeah.
Culture shock.
Yeah. So that's a perfect example. So look at how that changed your physiology. And what I find is that women are especially susceptible because of their neurohormonal systems, their endocrine systems, and the receptors on those different organs, like your ovaries and your uterus. And what we found is that those emotional experiences early in life, and it's really different with everybody, right? For you, it was some kind of a traumatic event because that changing from the safety of that small environment to a much larger one. I always tell people, the way you break out of fear behavior is if you imagine a target, okay, and you're looking at the center of that target, that's where we often live. That's where we feel comfortable. But each concentric ring of that target, every time you move outside of one of these rings, you become uncomfortable and go back to the middle.
Mm-hmm.
That's your safety, even if it's dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
So if suddenly we're thrown in an environment where we've lost the barriers,
Mm-hmm.
we're like this. So now you're in defense physiology. And so what are you creating in your brain? Those thoughts are creating physiological changes on a cellular level.
I think about that for performers that are, young. I don't know, we can use all these pop stars that are really early in life,
Yeah.
and they're like worldwide famous people, and how someone like that adapts to that.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
And so it's
like they're my patients.
Right. Like there's Ava Max, or I mean, we could name the Chaperone.
But
There's so many. How do you? So when you're talking about this, how important it is to understand the way that you're messaging to yourself all throughout the day, and that's every day, and the days look very similar. My days, I wake up, thank God, happy in the morning. I'm always excited about the day, but I immediately will start to think about the challenges of getting everything done. I'll worry about making sure I'm doing my best for my son who's 6, and then I think that for the most part, I suffer from having more of the limiting thoughts than the abundant thoughts. And so when you were describing that, then, and how that can even impact your health, then the panic is like, how can we remap our thoughts?
So
ourselves?
we have a saying in functional neurology that nerves that fire together wire together. So pathways wire, and that behavior becomes learned and reflexogenic. Okay, so you're stuck in a fight or flight response because that's the only way for you to be safe. So how do you change that?
So should you change? So let's say, I try to say to myself, this is going to be great. Like this, I'm in sales, so I'll say, the client's going to be really happy. I'm very attentive to the details. Connecting with people, networking is a really important piece of what I do. So I feel as though it's almost like I want to be as many places as I can in doing a great job for my clients.
Yeah.
And then there's the health factor of when you're working hard, not to neglect yourself. That's my thing, is like, if I'm focusing on my work and I have to present myself, which is also time consuming, there's things about I feel like guilt is the first operative word for me if I am not crushing it every day.
Yeah. And so what you're really saying is, here's my set of preconceptions about myself. And your the self-awareness is great, because you're saying I know this about myself, and so I have to shift my belief system. So how do you do that? Well, you say, I am successful, I am this. So, but it takes repetition. It takes hundreds of times of saying it. And even then, sometimes it's not enough, because the subconscious is so powerful at overriding conscious. And so I liked the description Dr. David Hawkins used of levels of consciousness. So the lowest level of consciousness is shame. And it has the most damaging effect, and then we look at psychoneuroimmunology, the connection with different neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So if somebody carries shame, and a lot of times they're not even aware they're carrying the shame, it's on an unconscious level, subconscious level, then they are sabotaging themselves every day through their behavior they're not even aware of. And they're not making the types of neurochemistry that would embolden them to change that pattern.
Yes, that's a heavy one.
Yeah,
That's a heavy one. It's way worse than guilt.
It's way worse. And they're all bad, because as you move up, you've got pride, scorn, anger, grief, regret, frustration. But then you're getting, so that people always think it's the anger that's driving. I go, no, it's hardly ever the anger. The anger is the response for something much deeper going on. And that's what I found as I started testing people, was we would see this. And if we cleared the emotional component was underneath that, the anger just disappeared. So you're trying to get to states of, as he described it, in levels of consciousness, to neutrality, and then eventually bliss. But to do that, you got to get rid of all these. And oftentimes I'll give somebody a mantra to say right at night as they're going to sleep, because that's when we have access to the supraconscious,
Wow,
which
that's
is the
key.
area that's when you really can influence the subconscious mind. So as
Right
we're
before
going to
bedtime.
sleep, it has to be worded a certain way. When you say it, and you say it for about a month, then you start to clear these patterns. And then the work that we do when I'm doing neuroemotional work on people is identifying what is it, what is the emotion, is there a timeline that happened in your
Yeah,
life that this
'cause
came with?
he'll find like the year I mean, we were joking, but like a friend at a birthday was telling me, I went to this doctor and he said what happened at 9 years old, and I was sold. I was like, I got to see him. But it's true, because I've been a believer for so long and looked for holistic doctor for so long, because I feel like most Western doctors just target the one body
Yeah.
part, or the Western. I always say Western's great for surgery and certain things, but it's often built up over so many years,
Yeah.
and Eastern's more preventative, right? But people wait till they finally have the symptom, but something's been brewing.
Something's
for
going.
a
I
long
see,
time.
and as we hold these things in, I've had several cases where, I can just put my hands on somebody, and because I know where to go and where the energy is stored in their body and the emotion, they'll break into tears. Or if I identify an emotion, or also I'll give them an age, and they go, 10 years old, nothing happened. And then
Oh.
tears start coming down their face. I go,
Oh my God.
nothing happened. Because you got to remember, the subconscious is hundreds of times cycles faster than the conscious mind. So it takes them quite a while to remember. Sometimes they don't actually remember, but the tears come anyway. Which I always found was fascinating, is that the subconscious will have the release before there's a conscious awareness of what's happening. Because I'm already on the nerve ganglia. I'm going exactly where is this stored. And I'm on the meridians. I'm changing things as they're thinking about it. And that has been the biggest pivotal shift I've seen in people's health, is being able to identify these things in their life that have created these patterns.
And do you find that, because a lot of it's not about everyone's going to go through stuff, but is it the people that are holding it in? Like, do you find that maybe journaling or speaking about it does help? 'Cause
Yes.
you're at least
In fact,
getting it out?
I plug them, and depending on what's going on with somebody, because there's some people who have a lot of trauma. And so, and I get referred from therapists and psychologists for the type of work I do. And then I refer back when I think that they're going to, because talk therapy, just sitting on the couch, just talking, there's some benefit, but somebody can come in and tell me something that happened 25 years ago. I said, have you been in therapy? They go, yeah. And they're still crying about it.
Yeah.
So clearly something on the subconscious level has not been addressed, even with all that therapy, multiple therapists. And it wasn't until we addressed that sort of limbic response, and then they did the inner work they needed to do on a deeper level. So there's different kind of therapy for that. And so I refer them out for that. But it is the most important part of healing.
And then what about people who carry grief?
Yeah. I mean, it's profound. I see it all the time. It's one of the most common things I see. And you think about what generates that. And some people, it's the loss of something really incredible, like their child, a spouse, a parent. And we have to then get into spirituality.
Our favorite topic.
Right.
I will say, you had said to me, grief came up for me at 8. And I never thought about it like that. But that's when I moved from South Africa as a little girl, and I left.
Interesting.
I left all my cousins and my aunts and my uncles and my school. And I had this funny accent, and the cars were on the other side of the road. I mean, it was like culture shock.
Yeah. It is.
But I never thought about it as, I know it was like obviously traumatizing, but and the therapist once said, did your parents prepare you for that? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, then they didn't. But it was also
No.
that generation. But I didn't think about it as grief.
No.
Ever. But it was showing up in my
It
body
showed up as grief.
as grief.
Yeah. So grief, isolation, loneliness, these are really profound ones for people.
And physiologically, that's when my posture got all bad.
Yes.
We try to work on it,
Yeah.
but it's been like that for so long, because I think I was
The
just,
posture will
My
my
do
mom used
this.
to be like, stand up straight. And I'm like, but it started when I moved.
Yeah.
People close in.
That's what
Right.
happened to
And,
me. And it never
The
went away.
neurology which is the motor system, is then sending messages out to our postural neurology. First time somebody walks in, I look at their posture, because it's telling me what's going on in the brain. And so if I see a head tilt and a shoulder up
Yeah,
here
I'm
and a
like,
twisting
yep.
like this, there can be a lot of reasons for that. But what I found, what was really interesting is that, yeah, some people have an auto accident or fall off a cycle. And sure, there's a lot of neurological injury reflexes we have to correct and things that haven't been done before by other practitioners. But what about the person who didn't have any of that? And they come in like that, and their posture's like this, their shoulders are forward. And when I clear the emotion and they stand up, they're standing up perfectly straight.
Yeah. And
All of it.
also,
Yeah.
also I'm really tight, right, in my legs. Like
Yeah.
I've never been able to do yoga. He'll try and lift my leg and it's literally 2 inches off the table. And he goes, "You're not tight. It's your brain." And he'll do something like, "Think of this thought." And he'll go do his little machine. And then all of a sudden my leg goes all the way up, like within 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So
You're
it just
seeing a
shows you-
response of exactly what happens when because all of that is defense. And that programming is wired. Remember I said nerves that fire together, wire together. That wiring happens, and it can be things that set you off that you wouldn't even dream of. The tone of somebody's voice. Somebody said something.
Oh,
You're not consciously aware of it, but it's triggering the subconscious programming. And this can be, confounding for people. But when you get to the deeper stuff, and the more you work on that system, and you'll see me use I use homeopathy, I use flower essences. I work on to me, it's a psycho-spiritual approach because we are really spiritual beings.
Tell them about the flower essences. It's really cool.
okay.
So flower essences are amazing because they work on many different things simultaneously. Because we are not, products of just usually a singular trauma. Our perceptions about different things that have happened in our life are creating the compendium of responses you get in your body now. So flower essences, when I match the right remedy up with people, I often custom blend them.
Tell them what flower essences are.
So flower essences are essentially, Dr. Edward Bach was an English physician in the late 1800s, and he was an intuitive. So he could go around and feel flowers. And what is the most beautiful thing in nature? You look at it. Flowers, right? What do women like to get from us? Flowers. Sure. So flowers have this incredible vibrational energy, and through things like Kirlian photography and stuff, you can see the field around them. Very powerful. It turns out that different flowers seem to affect different emotional aspects of our being and our connection to source energy. So intuitively, when those have been mapped out, and I use many different kinds, I can test them on the body and see which ones you need. And there's a profound change when you put them on. Your neurology changes.
They're just like drops, and you put them in water and you sip it slowly. But one has been like truth telling. One has been like,
there's trauma ones that I use that work on early trauma that was programmed in from an early time in your childhood. Ones that have to do with relationships between your mother and your father. It sounds crazy, but they work.
They work. And he'll test them. He'll test them on your body and show you how you'll hold strong with it on. Yeah. And then he'll take it off your body, the vial off, and you're weak. And
I used to blind test this stuff to see, because I might just tricking myself, but no, it was bang on. And so it is, remember, we're energy beings by nature. I think it was Richard Conn Henry, who was the quantum physicist at Johns Hopkins, that published an article in Nature on this very topic of human quantum fields. And at the end of it, he says, the universe is immaterial. We are mental and spiritual beings. So live and enjoy. Mm-hmm. Now that's coming from the highest accolades of science. Mm-hmm. When they really broke it down, that's what he's saying. We're spiritual beings. So live your life and enjoy.
Amen.
I love that. Even he'll test you explain to us. So he has you march in place. Okay. This is one of the first tests he does.
Oh, that's
And he's
fun.
like, march in place. And you'll be like right in front of him. And he's like, okay, open your eyes. And you'll literally be diagonal out the door. Yeah. And you're like, how the hell did I get here?
Oh, wow.
Explain that to us.
It's good for people to see what their brain's doing. All right. Because you don't know when you're in this body how dysfunctional it is. So a standing march test in neurology, we use it for different things, pick up brain lesions and things. But if we just have the population do it, and that's what I found, you're going to see a lot of dysfunction, because your proprioception, which are these receptors that feed back to your brain telling you where you are in space, they become dysfunctional. the more that's going on in your body. So what I'll do is just have people stick their arms out and say, don't open your eyes. I want you to march in place here.
I was out the door.
Very few actually stick until they're under treatment for a while. They can stick in place once we're working on the nervous system, but they'll fly off onto the couch, or they'll go out, like her heading out the door. I thought, oh, she doesn't like me. What's going on?
You literally
Where'd
are in
you
shock
go?
when you open your eyes.
Yeah. Or you turn around completely the other direction. They're looking for me. What? I have lots of them like that. So just basically a neurology test to look, and we look at the eye fields and gaze and, how the brainstem works. And so all of those, I can put together and say, all right, this part of your brain isn't working well. Your cerebellum on the right, your left basal ganglia, whatever it is. And then we go and looking at why. So in functional neurology, they might say, well, we need to shine light in your eye over here and do this and evoke a potential on your right foot and then bring the brain back in balance. And that's great for brain injuries. But what I found is that when you clear the body and just neurologically balance it through the type of chiropractic I do and through frequency modulation and through mind body, that all clears up. I didn't have to do that other stuff. So I found that, if you look at something and you just look at minutia, which is just too much detail, you don't see the big picture. And so what I found, no matter how much I went down rabbit holes of studying the minutia, it always went back to central control thoughts. All right. Fix that. Yes, you can't eat a bad diet. You can't not exercise. You can't not detoxify. You have to do all of that because, again, your cells are responsive to the environment. That's what turns those gate channels off and on the chill.
So, and we create these pathways. So the last part of my health that we're trying to tackle is, for the last 10 years, my hormones have been cuckoo. But you're saying, a lot of people, it's like, oh, you're low in this, just add this. But that's not the problem with me. It's like you're a complicated case because I made a pathway, right? From my brain to one of my ovaries of stress. So every time I have stress, I feel like my body looks at my hormones that come in like it's an attack on my body, right?
Yeah. And so, it's interesting because those are, again, pathways and energy thoughts. Yeah. And so you're rewiring those pathways over time. And a lot of people say, because some people, it's a miracle, like things change instantly. Other people, it may take them a year to get what they want, 2 years. But as long as you go in the right direction, you're doing what the body needs. Your body is basically meant to heal itself.
Yeah. So when you identified that pathway directly to your ovaries, then what was the important thing to do once you identified it? What was important for Liat to do? Was it the homeopathy, and was it a combination?
Sometimes you do need temporary supplements to help your body, right?
We may say, there might be an herb or something to help facilitate an imbalance between the estrogen and progesterone, or help the liver to detoxify, or help conjugate the hormones. It's complicated, right? Because we're beings, and we live in a toxic soup now. So we are constantly having to deal with toxins. So that's the other onslaught, besides the thoughts, are the toxins, and which is amazing because the father of chiropractic said it. D.E. Palmer said it's trauma, toxins, and thoughts. Yeah, how right he was in the 1800s. Triple T. He was right, and it was all about nerve energy and energy in the body. And
what we found that I had the MTHFR gene,
yes,
which a lot of people have. So you're not methylating properly. That's why I would have reactions to everything.
Yeah.
So that's another couldn't clear the toxins.
And we were talking about genes earlier. You're saying, genes have on and off switches. But so methylation is an inherited thing that has to do with, and methylation is how we balance our hormones, detoxify brain chemistry, repair tissue, DNA. It's a very important biochemical pathway. But up to 40% of the population has some form of error where that gene code is now making it so, let's say you can't absorb folate that well, especially when the body's under stress. That's the interesting part, because it gets back to epigenetics again. The more stressed you are, the more that gene turns on. That's why I tell people, you're going to need a little more of the methylation support. So you need specific kinds of coenzymes of B vitamins.
And I went and tested my kids early, because I remember my mom would bring me to doctors and be like, Like I was like 9, 10, 11. She's like, my daughter has no energy. Like
Mhm.
what's wrong? And I mean, this would have saved me. It's a simple vitamin, it's
Yeah.
methylfolate. So I got my kids tested, and sure enough, they each have a copy, and Trevor has a different copy than I do. But
Yeah.
now I've put them on methylation, and I see such a difference in everything.
It's very important. It's something that gets missed a lot.
Yeah.
We know the science on it now. It is important to support it. But once again, that's another example of a gene expression, right? So until the body is maybe it's possible for you to downregulate that down to where you need a fraction of the support. But just in the world we live in with the high toxic load and the stress levels, and we don't live in utopia.
No.
Well, you do, but it's okay. We don't live in utopia. She's created her own utopia here. But that is, so we have to support the body and we have to meet its needs. And so we have to use all these different things because we're just not, allopathic medicine or standard medicine is based on symptom suppression for the most part. So obviously we don't have deficiency of a drug. We have a need to modulate something or turn something off. And a drug blocks a receptor, and it's primarily how it works. You have high blood pressure, we're going to give you something to block this, and then your vessels are going to stay
side
open.
effects, and then it causes
when we
other
know,
complications.
We can give those same patients, a deep meditation exercise for a couple months, and their blood pressure drops profoundly. So honestly, even if it runs in the family, that's gene expression, we still can modulate that by changing here.
And even the MTHFR gene, part of it can cause depression, depending on the kind.
Anxiety, depression.
He's had patients come in on like antidepressants, and it's just that they had this gene. He puts them on a high dose of methylfolate, and it completely reverses.
Yeah. Or, along with doing the other stuff.
Yeah. But yeah.
The common thing that we're seeing these days is that your GI tract is so important, and everything that's in your digestion is part of your longevity. And that I know from a young age that whenever I get stressed out, you get a stomach ache when you're not feeling well, when you're nervous, when you have children's anxiety.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, we have some friends we tease, Ginger Rose.
Jameson?
Yeah.
IBS? I used to have IBS before I started seeing him.
Yes. Yeah. So that's all. That is a combination of two things. It's not just, it's mind and body.
Yes.
It's your second brain.
The
right?
gut is your second brain. And, your dopamine and serotonin receptors, a huge amount of them in the gut, higher amounts than in the brain. Your spinal cord is full of neuropeptides, which are these molecules of emotion, 90%. So if you think about it, that's how sometimes I can do an adjustment on somebody, they break into tears because they've been holding it in that nerve ganglia for so long on a chemical level as well as a neurological. So your brain gut is connected. There's the vagus nerve, which comes out of our brainstem, goes and has branches right into your gut. And it's a two-way system.
That's why I would always pass out with stomach pain.
Yeah.
I would faint.
Yeah, you'll get a vagal concomitant like that. So what we found is actually if you change the biome, there are flora that help us sleep better. There's flora that help modulate our state of happiness. So it changes, you can change brain chemistry by changing your gut biome. And most people have not a very good gut biome. We started doing a lot of biome testing. So, and that was a reason for that. Well, a toxic environment and toxic thoughts.
And what?
So that's a two-way system.
Right.
And as far as diet, what would you say are the absolute across the board? I know it depends on people, but are there absolute no's right now that you?
I don't like to say absolute no's or anything. Maybe Twinkies.
Yeah.
But obviously processed food.
Yeah.
Okay. Sugar.
Yeah.
In high amounts. I'm not a fan of gluten. You know that. Yeah. And it's because what we've done to gluten. It's not the same thing. So if somebody wants to eat that now, I say, well, go get ancient grains, einkorn, that sort of thing, where you don't have the high level, because so many people have it, they just don't realize it. And it's causing problems. Corn is another one. We call them frankenfoods. The top ones, dairy is not bad for you, but homogenized, pasteurized, dairy that's not fed what its native diet should be, which is grass,
So grass
is a toxic substance.
raw dairy.
Raw dairy is perfectly
Raw.
healthy. Yeah. Corn has become a real problem because of how we've genetically modified it and spliced weird things into it. And so I find that most people react to corn or the protein zein, which is in corn. But if I go to another country, I don't see the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain things in our diet. We have to be careful. So too many grains drive too much insulin, and that can cause a lot of problems in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So just eating a more, we call it a Paleolithic diet, really. So looking about what our ancestors ate and learning to eat in a way our ancestors ate, because food wasn't always readily available. There would be, feast, famine. So our body has that built in, and we found that actually helps turn on the ability of the body to heal itself. So little periods of fasts help something called autophagy on a cellular level. Let your body cleaning up, misfolded proteins and debris in the cell and cleaning it out. Our brains get clearer. Our telomeres are improved, so longevity improves. So learning how to do, time-restricted eating, not overdoing it, start gradually, and learning to use that and something called block fast, where you do certain days in a row. Very powerful. One of the most powerful ways of healing. And most people know what intermittent fasting is now, or at least the term. But if I asked somebody that 10 years ago, they go, what are you talking about?
Right. So what is intermittent fasting? Is it like 16 off, 8 on?
Yeah, like that's a good way to start. And you may not, we think now you might want to do that 3 or 4 days a week initially. And that's, it's not that hard. You're eating in an 8-hour window. And then you might have a day, you can even keep the carbs low during that time, but you might have higher carbs on the weekend, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But you need to be exercising through all of this.
What's a good carb? Some good carbs to put in
So
your
good
body.
carbs would be, there's carbs that actually help like sweet potatoes can be a good, a decent carb if you don't overdo it.
Mm-hmm.
Baked potato?
Yeah. Remember so solanine, which is alpha solanine, is in nightshades. So some people genetically don't do well with it. So your eggplant, they can cause joint pain, gut problems, even issues with the brain. So if you have joint pain and that type, we'd say, all right, get off of those solanine foods initially. So you look up nightshades and you'll see all of those we just talked about, including paprika and goji berries. And that will help drop that down. So a potato wouldn't work with that. A sweet potato would, or even the Japanese purple sweet
What about
potatoes.
rice? Is that
Yeah,
bad?
or yams.
So rice, it depends on the person, right? Somebody's really struggling with weight, they're really struggling. I get them off grains because it really makes a difference. And it's hard at first, but there's enough alternatives that you can put in that really help. And that is, it drops the insulin, it drops the inflammation. And now you heal the gut and do the things. And then later on, they seem to be able to handle some rice.
Got it.
But initially, you've got to drop inflammation. So we put people on an anti-inflammatory diet. Most autoimmunity is based on how our gut biome is functioning. So yeah, so if you fix that, you drop the inflammation, you turn off the switches that affect our T cells.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wealth of information, right?
Yeah, and I actually clocked it all. I'm like, okay.
No, you'll be
paleo.
tested.
Yes, yes, that's right.
You
I'm
should
ready
see
for
him,
my
though,
quiz.
Because even with stress, prevent it. Don't wait for it to.
Yeah.
Although it'll take a year to get into. No, just
Yeah, but
kidding. It'll take a couple months. He does have a waiting list.
It takes a while. But it's a process, not an event. I tell people. So healing is a process. The event is what everybody wants. Say, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Like, are you really?
Yeah.
So then you get into biohacking at that stage and say, well, how am I going to improve longevity? And so there's a lot of information on that now. But it's when you get it backwards, is when you try to do that stuff before you've really covered the basics. So
Well,
you really got to.
Everybody now wants, this culture is quick fix, quick fix.
It's
That's why we
all
go to the
quick
pills,
fix.
we go to surgery, we go to these biohacking, but you're not dealing with
You're
the
not dealing with
underneath.
the issue. There's some wonderful stuff in biohacking, but when you're not really dealing with things you need to deal with to heal on a deeper level, then you're wasting your time. Do that first, and then you'll see what your body does. It just unfolds. It's all about optimizing potential of your body and what your potential to heal is. And everybody has a very powerful inbred potential to heal. We just have to nourish it and open it up. and remove the interferences that are causing it.
Remove the interferences.
Remove the
that are
interferences.
causing that.
That's the biggest.
That's
That
it.
usually happens somewhere in your neurospinal system. It's like little circuits that blow.
Change your
And,
thoughts, change your life.
Yep.
Right.
For sure.
If people want to come see you, so he practices in Woodland Hills. By the way, do you
You do?
see people that are, yeah, he's in Woodland Hills.
Yeah. right at the
Do
front.
you see people that are far away or only in person?
No, I do. Yeah, no, I've got people all over the world that we do virtual consults for,
Okay.
time permitting.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's more, where I get on and we can do functional testing wherever they are. And it's just me working with them that way. A lot of the other stuff is, you have to come in the office for what I do directly on the body.
And where can people, you guys have a website,
Yeah, ByrnesFamilyWellness.com.
Burns
which is
Family,
being
BY.
completely revamped. So that's a really old website, but yeah, that's BYRNES.
Yeah.
And I don't, because everything's word of mouth, I don't like advertise.
No, he doesn't.
I don't
And it's packed.
want to.
His practice
because
is
I can't. Yeah. I can't.
packed.
Yeah. It's just
But-
because we help someone and they know somebody else that needs to be helped. And usually the first patient that's booked goes out and books their family afterwards. And it's not because I'm so great. It's because they know when they, it's not. It's that they know somebody finally cares, is going to listen to them, and is actually going for the cause of the problem. I
And he
think most
really
people
does
do.
spend time. I mean, he gets in trouble by the girls in
They're
the
always
front
beating
because
me
he
with the
always
hook.
goes overtime, but he really, really cares about, you're not just a number. You're not just an in out. He really cares about each patient, but it's finding the source. There's nothing he can't figure out. So, and I wish I knew this I take my kids, but I wish I knew when Austin was a baby, even, like how he can adjust babies that have colic. That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But next life,
Next one.
next lifetime.
It's
But
never
thank
late.
you so much for coming. Any
Absolutely.
more questions you have for him?
I mean, how many more hours can we
I
stay?
know. We'll have to have you back, or
I'll
you
be
might
happy
be
to.
on the Dare to Heal panel. We'll
Yeah.
see. He'll do some muscle testing.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
definitely get you in with the right guest.
Okay.
We just have to get him. But thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Absolutely.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of Heal to Feel. You can write in and ask your questions on our show's IG page at H2F Pod, and we'll address your questions on next week's episode. If this episode helped you, we would love for you to share it with your friends and family. Share the fun with all those that can benefit from a good laugh or cry with us. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and we would greatly appreciate you.